Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report and a company update from Sitka Gold, chatting with the Vice President of Corporate Development and a Director, Mike Burke. We are going to be providing an exploration update that includes some news from the middle of September that reported the best hole to date at the Rhosgobel area. This is all on the RC Gold project in the Yukon. There's a lot more drilling that's still to come, as well as a financing that the company announced a bought deal, $25 million flow through shares. Lot for Mike and I to talk about. Sitka Gold is traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol SIG, on the OTCQB under the symbol SITKF, and the Frankfurt Exchange 1RF. Mike, let's talk about that September news release. The hole from Rhosgobel, 235 meters of 1.11 grams per ton gold from surface, also includes 40 meters of 2 grams per ton and 10 meters of over 5 grams per ton gold. Again, this is the best hole from this Rhosgobel area. Mike, take us through where these holes were drilled. There are just two within that news release, and what Rhosgobel is really turning into now.
Yeah, we released results from holes 9 and 10. Hole 9 was 118 meters of 1.09 grams per ton with some higher grade hits within that too. So we've just been stepping out within the main geochemical trend on the Rhosgobel, and holes 9 and 10 are right between 7 and 8 and 5 and 6. So we've drilled about a 300-meter stretch of this anomaly with the first 10 holes. And as you mentioned, hole 10 is our best hole to date, 235 meters of 1.11. But every one of those 10 holes have hit greater than 100 meters from surface of better than a gram per ton. So yeah, pretty great batting average given it's baseball season. We're batting 1,000 with 10 holes, all greater than 100 gram meter intersections. And I don't know if there's very many people that can say that. It's an incredible start to what looks to be a very significant discovery at RC Gold.
So I'm like just even looking at figure two. You've drilled a lot of holes in this area. We only are up to hole 10 being released, but we can see all the little stars on these holes that have been drilled. All the visible gold that you are seeing. Obviously, not an indication of what the results will be, but visible gold better than not having visible gold. What are you seeing in terms of overall strike length here, including the holes that haven't been released but still have hit visible gold?
Yeah, we've drilled about 1.2 kilometers along strike of this mineralized trend. We still need to drill to the north and south, but that's going to have to wait a year. There's a lot of drilling to do on this. We've done 42 holes. We're up over 12,000 meters. So that's a pretty significant strike length. And it is curious. Visible gold's always a great indicator that you've got gold in your hole. But interestingly, these holes 9 and 10 didn't have a lot of visible gold in them, and yet there are our best results to date. So we're pretty encouraged that the remaining 32 holes that we're waiting on assays will be very encouraging and really start to define what looks to be a really sizable deposit.
So really, before all this drilling at Rhosgobel, the story here was this Blackjack and Eiger zone that total already 2.8 million ounces of gold. That's 1.3 million ounces in indicated, 1.5 million ounces in inferred. Those are more advanced areas, but Rhosgobel, how is it stacking up at this early stage compared to what you saw at Blackjack and Eiger?
Yeah, well, Blackjack and Eiger are still, I mean, pretty awesome. Blackjack, when you look at the results to date on that, we're hitting very high grades at depth where we think that this deposit will transition from an open pit scenario to a deeper underground deposit, given that, hole 75 and 76 that we released earlier, 75 hit 25 meters of 5 grams per ton down at 600 meters depth, and 76 hit, a 8 meter and a 6 meter intersection, a 5 grams per ton. This Rhosgobel, it's in a different area of the property, 5 kilometers away from Blackjack, a little bit more subdued topography, and the deposit, instead of being, Well, we don't know how deep it goes. We're just getting started here. But definitely this at surface intersections that we're seeing and this 1.3 kilometer strike length that we've defined to date with our drilling suggests that this is a very large deposit. I mean, if we look at Fort Knox in Alaska, they've produced over 9 million ounces. The Eagle mine had a 5 million ounce resource. Banyan Gold at over 7 million ounces, Snowline Gold 8 million ounces. These reduced intrusion related gold deposits can be 5 million ounces plus, and Rhosgobel is definitely showing that potential.
What about that depth component? Because what we keep seeing here, at least early on, is all this mineralization at surface. So, how deep have you drilled and what have you been seeing, let's say, near the end of these holes?
Yeah, we've seen visible gold as deep as over 300 meters. And again, we've drilled a fence of holes along strike. So as far as how deep this goes, we don't know. And it's really curious. And when I'll go back to the blackjack. The kind of model of these is that the mineralization is up in the carapace of these intrusions. But blackjack, we've drilled over 1.1 kilometers vertical distance. So if we see those kind of legs on Rhosgobel, then this is truly significant, but we got to do a lot more drilling to really test that depth potential. We're going to have to step back and do more deeper drilling. But for now, we're seeing that mineralization, like I said, right from surface down to 300 meters depth was the deepest sniff we got of visible gold. And hole 10 here, 236 meters. And that was a fairly, I think that was a minus 70 that hole. So, it's probably 220 meters deep that we're seeing that 1 gram material.
Now, after this program, how many holes in total are you going to have at Rhosgobel, and will you be putting out a resource on it?
We've got 42 holes now to date and over 12,000 meters. So we have to wait to see what the remaining 32 holes are. But, I could plug these 10 holes into a program and come up with a resource. Anybody can do that. So we're pretty certain that if we keep getting these great results, we will produce an initial mineral resource on this. And what we've done typically is we see our results roll into early to mid December, and then we do our best to get a resource out early in the new year. The last couple times that we updated the resource on the Blackjack deposit, we were able to get that out by the end of January. So we'd have that same general target in mind. We've done over 32,000 meters of drilling. So there's a little bit more work there to update the Blackjack, the Eiger, and a new resource on this Rhosgobel. So we'd be looking at the first quarter. Haven't fully committed to that. We got to see the rest of the results. But if they continue like they are, it's pretty obvious that there are resources there that we can do an estimate on.
So within that news release too, you also mentioned tungsten, that there are significant intercepts of tungsten associated with this gold mineralization. Explain this. What does this all mean?
Yeah, these tombstone suite intrusions, it's a belt of intrusions that stretches across Yukon and Alaska. And it goes to Tombstone Tungsten Suite. The eastern part of the Yukon is called the Tungsten Suite, and that's where Cantung and Mactung are located. Around the Eagle Mine, there's the Mar Tungsten Deposit, and adjacent to the Rhosgobel, there's a tungsten skarn occurrence that, we haven't done any work on, but all these deposits have associated tungsten with them. The deal with Rhosgobel is we're seeing a lot of tungsten. So we're seeing, a higher percentage of tungsten. And you saw we did analysis on hole number 2 where we did the press pellet. It's a more accurate assay method to look at the tungsten results. And it came out, 175 meters of 0.9% tungsten with some higher grade hits in there. Tungsten's pretty easy to identify. You see the photo on our press release. It fluoresces under ultraviolet light. It's a very pretty mineral. And yeah, we see it in all our drill holes, just like this visible gold. We're able to identify that scheelite mineralization, and it looks like we have a significant component that could be a very nice byproduct that we produce. You can recover the scheelite through gravity methods. We're doing more metallurgy on our deposits and on the Rhosgobel, and we've looked at gravity recovery for the gold and then leaching of the tails to get all the gold out. And a gravity method would fit well with this tungsten as a byproduct. So we need to do more work on that, but certainly it could add a very significant component and value to this deposit.
So does this change your exploration at all or change your strategy in terms of resources when you update the resources if you can include tungsten?
Yeah, I mean it's certainly obviously a pretty significant component. I mean, you always have to look at metallurgy and how you can recover that. So we anticipate, good results. It's pretty straightforward. So definitely it's something that we've been aware of right from the get-go. I mean, obviously we look at our core, our geologists log it and we check it for tungsten. And as soon as we started drilling Rhosgobel, it was like, holy, there's a lot of tungsten here. So you have to do different assay methods. We have to look at ways of kind of refining that, but it's not going to change our approach because, our main target is the gold. But obviously, work on this tungsten to demonstrate that it is a viable byproduct is something that we're doing now and will continue to do.
Okay, so clearly Rosgobel is very important to the company, especially after this year's program and all the results still to come. But you also mentioned that there's a lot of other targets that you have tested in this year's program. Blackjack, Eiger, you and I have even talked about Contact. I believe we've talked Pukelman as well, but just remind everybody all the different areas that you have drilled this year on the project.
Yeah, you just about had them all. Pretty good, Corey. So Blackjack, Saddle Zone is within the conceptual pit limits of the Blackjack. We've released some results there up to 50 meters at 2 grams per ton. So that's obviously going to impact that Blackjack resource nicely. Eiger, then the Contact and Pukelman. Pukelman's the intrusion. Contact is an area that there's gold hosted in the meta sediments adjacent to the Pukelman intrusion. We've drilled there. Rhosgobel, of course, just to the east of the Rhosgobel is an area called the Bearpaw Breccia. It's an intrusive quartz breccia that was drilled historically. We've put a couple holes into there. It has some higher grade historical results, better than a gram. And then we also threw a couple holes into the May Q intrusion. That, if you go to our corporate presentation and look at the property map, the May Q is the most southeastern intrusion on the project. And we announced last year we did a bit of a surface program there, and we had some great results on surface, some sheeted quartz veining. So we figured we'd pop out there and give it a quick test.
Let's now talk about the financing. October 8th, you announced a bought deal financing, $25 million, flow through shares, no warrant, the flow through price being $1.54 a share. Talk to us about this financing and what it does for you in terms of next year's program compared to this year's program.
Yeah, it sets us up for a great year in 2026. Obviously, last year we drilled, 10,000 meters. This year we're up over 32,000. We're having great success, so we need to keep drilling. That's how you find gold, and that's exactly what we're doing. So with this financing, $25 million, we have a great location. We're only 2 hours out of Dawson. There's a international airport. Our drilling costs, it's a road accessible property, are very low, $350 Canadian a meter. I think any project in Canada would be happy to be within 2 hours of a international airport. So that's one of the reasons our drilling costs are low. So that $25 million will easily let us drill in the 50 to 60,000 meter range with a little gas left in the tank. We're doing baseline environmental studies, other metallurgical work. So there's a lot of different components that are coming into play here. So we are fully financed for a very significant program next year to keep expanding and drilling and testing known deposits, to try and define how big they are. Like the Blackjack and Eiger are still open. We haven't finished drilling those off yet. The Rhosgobel, new discovery with only 12,000 meters of drilling into it. It deserves a whole lot more than that when you look at the footprint of this thing. So yeah, we're really excited about going into 2026 and to be able to hit the ground running. We'll start that drilling in late February. We can drill year round, but we typically start in late February, and that's what we're able to do now that we've got a healthy treasury.
Yeah, cashed up for next year. But hey, look, there's still a lot of holes to be released from this year's program. So I'm sure a lot for us still to discuss. If anybody has any follow-up questions for Mike, please send me an email. I'll get him to address those and possibly bring them up on future updates. Again, Mike Burke, Vice President of Corporate Development at Sitka Gold. Mike, thank you very much for this update.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Good talking to you again.